Good day, viewers and listeners, and welcome again to this special program where we will be speaking about the slew of measures instituted to cushion the cost of living and to really put a more disposable income into the pockets of Guyanese. I am with the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, and of course, I'm your host, Godfrey Brooms. I'm here with the man who announced the 6.5% increase to public servants' salaries, which many are joyous about. Dr. Singh, welcome.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. As always, it's a great pleasure to be here with you.
All right, so while a large portion of the population is really happy and overjoyed with this 6.5% increase, there are some sections that are not pleased with this amount. You know, those persons were counting sequentially. In 2021 there was a 7% increase, 2022 an 8% increase, so they were thinking maybe a 9% increase. However, a 6.5% increase was given, or is given right now. So can you explain the factors to consider when deciding on increases for public servants?
Sure. So, Godfrey, let me first of all thank you for giving me the opportunity to elaborate on this matter. When I made the announcement, necessarily the announcement was confined to the formalities of what was being communicated. And that setting really didn't allow for an elaboration of the issues that surround the question of public sector emoluments. So I'm really glad for this opportunity to speak at greater length on this matter. Let me say first of all that it is at the onset that it is perfectly understandable that everybody wants their incomes to increase. That is an unchallengeable, indeed it's a commendable desire on everybody's part. And so we all want, and everybody wants, their income to increase progressively over time, and indeed perhaps in the shortest possible time. That's a natural desire. Everybody wants their well-being to be increased. Let me say in the same breath that when you speak about disposable income and you speak about well-being, disposable income and well-being comprise a number of factors. They don't comprise only a single number that is associated with your salary increase, because there are a number of other variables, there are a number of other issues and interventions that our government has been implementing and that governments implement over time to influence disposable income. And I'm going to come back to give a few examples of what I'm speaking about. And thirdly, I've seen this notion you mentioned about people counting sequentially. I've heard this discussion that because a higher percentage was given in a previous year, there's an expectation that in a subsequent year, the percentage increase will be even higher. Salary increases don't work like that. You don't start off giving 5 one year and the following year 6 and the following year 7 and the following year 8, because at some point in time, you're going to end up, if you follow that sequence, you're going to end up paying 50-60% salary increases. Salary increases don't work that way. And it is a fact that we gave in the previous 2 years that we were in government 7 and 8. And it is a fact now, of course, that we've given 6.5. And if you take those 3 years together, that means that in the space of just 3 years, compounded, because you can't just add one, increases are given one on top of the other. If you take those 3 years compounded, we've given salary increases in just 3 years of 23%. And so the 7 is on top of the 8, or the 8 is on top of the 7 rather. The 6.5 is on top of the 7 and the 8. And so these are layers, one being put on top of the other. It's not a question that you got 8 last year and it was taken away from you and then you got 6.5 this year. Your 6.5 is being put on top of what you got last year. And so compounded over 3 years, you're getting 23%. Now, in addition to that, we need to bear in mind that government has implemented so many other measures, and like I said, I'm going to elaborate on what those are in a minute. But I want particularly to speak to, you mentioned some of the naysayers. I want to speak particularly to a press release that I saw issued by the opposition. I believe it might have been the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, or the APNU-AFC. in relation to this salary increase, and making all sorts of promises that the APNU AFC will give, were they to have an opportunity to return to government, will give public servants what they describe as a livable wage, essentially indicating that they will be more generous. They had an opportunity for 5 years. And I see in their press release, they make mention of the fact that they gave public servants a 77% salary increase over a 5-year period. No, we have only been in office for 3 years. They're speaking about 5 years. They say they gave public servants a so much salary increase over 5 years. I wish to make the following point, that while APNU AFC may have given X amount of salary increase to public servants over 5 years, what they are silent about is how much they took away from public servants. So, for example, they took away from public servants, and I'm speaking here public servants meaning teachers, members of the discipline forces, etc. So they're claiming they gave X% salary increase to public sector employees. What they're not saying is that from the members of the discipline services, they took away a whole month's salary every year because they scrapped the bonus. That's 1 month of tax-free salary that they took away. They're not counting that in there. They're not counting the fact that all government employees who were on contract gratuity, including people like doctors in the medical service, ordinary public servants in the ministries, I have public servants in the Ministry of Finance, who were told you're on contract gratuity, you cannot be on contract gratuity, you have to go on the fixed establishment. The effect of that is that you lose your contract gratuity. That contract gratuity is 22.5% of your emoluments. So when you take a person and move them from contract gratuity terms, from a fixed term contract arrangement to a permanent establishment arrangement, you're taking away 22.5% of their emoluments. You're taking away their gratuity, which they're receiving, which they would receive now. You're taking that away from them. They're not counting that. They're not counting the cash grant that we used to give to parents. These parents are, a significant number of them are public servants, teachers, policemen. They all have children going to school. All of these people, the APNU AFC, when they were in government, they took away the cash grant that these parents were getting. So these promises that are being made by the APNU AFC in relation to the public servants that they profess, whose cause they profess to champion, they are not saying what they took away through taking away the bonus, taking away the cash grant for teachers, taking away contract gratuity, taking away salary in lieu of leave. They said if you don't use your salary, your leave, you lose it. Many public servants are unable to take their leave due to the exigencies of the service. They apply at the end of the year for salary in lieu of leave, and once the case can be made that their services were required, were a key and critical requirement, they get paid for their salary, their leave. They were forced under the APNU to forego their leave and not be paid for their salary in lieu of leave. And then, of course, you have all of the other things. Public servants have elderly parents. Those parents had the electricity and water subsidy taken away from them. Public servants have to buy medical supplies and educational supplies for their children. All of those things were subject to VAT under the APNU AFC. And so the reality is that whatever percent the APNU AFC is claiming to have given public servants, they in fact took back a lot more from public servants if you count all of those things, all of those examples that I gave. And there are many others. The 200 taxes that they slapped on people, taxes on construction materials, taxes on building supplies, taxes on heavy equipment, which fed into food prices, all of those things. And so I wanted particularly, because you mentioned the naysayers, I wanted particularly to respond to that very disingenuous press release that was issued by the APNU AFC, and to say that while they are claiming to have granted, well, first of all, when they had an opportunity to improve the circumstances of public servants, they did not do so. And in fact, they acted in a manner that was severely contrary to the interest of public servants by taking away all of those benefits. So they were giving with one hand, but taking away even more with another. And I had to mention that when you mentioned the naysayers. Now, to come back to what I was saying earlier, when you speak about disposable income, you have to speak about, first of all, adjustments to salaries. So like I said, over a 3-year period, we have given 23% increase over a 3-year period. That's one. Two, we have also adjusted a number of specific categories of public sector employees, very significant in numbers: the discipline services, health workers, education, persons working in education, but particularly teachers. Several categories have had their salaries adjusted upwards. Some as high as 50, 60, 70% have had their salaries adjusted upwards. You are well aware of this. That has been announced. These measures have been announced publicly over time. We have also granted, or restored rather, the 1-month bonus for discipline services. That, if you consider that, it's an extremely valuable benefit that is received by the discipline services that was taken away from them. We have also, of course, removed all of the 200 taxes that the APNU AFC had put on public servants, teachers, nurses, etc., but also on the general public. We have removed those, or the overwhelming majority of them. We have implemented a number of other measures. We, for example, very recently announced a cash grant of $25,000 to every single public servant, every single teacher, every single public sector employee, irrespective of where they work. And so all of those measures aggregate, in fact, to a very significant improvement in well-being. But in addition to that, the well-being of people also has to do with a number of other factors. So, for example, the ability to own your own home. The APNU AFC basically shut down the housing program, almost stopped allocating house lots, barely allocated a few after they lost the no confidence motion. The overwhelming majority of people who apply for those house lots are public servants and public sector employees, policemen, teachers. They all want to own a home. The APNU AFC shut down the housing program. We have resumed it. We have already allocated almost 30,000 house lots since we've come back to government. Who do you think those house lots are going to? Ordinary Guyanese who are now able to own a plot of land. We have introduced measures to reduce the cost of borrowing at the bank so that you can now go to the bank and borrow at the lowest interest rates for housing loans in living memory. You're able to get a housing loan. We have increased the ceiling. They maliciously cut in half the ceiling on mortgage interest relief. We have doubled it back, restored it to where it was. So persons can get tax relief on the interest that they pay on their mortgages, making their mortgages more affordable. It is no accident that 30,000 persons have applied for and been granted house lots. So when you speak about well-being, we all also want a house lot. 30,000 of us have been able to get a house lot now, none of whom got a house lot under the APNU. Everybody wants to own, ultimately every family wants to own a motor car. They introduced a ban that meant that motor cars above 8 years old could not be imported, that used car tires could not be imported, making car ownership more expensive for public servants. Who do you think are buying the reconditioned cars? It's ordinary Guyanese. When they instituted the ban of motor cars for motor cars above 8 years and used car tires, they immediately made car ownership too expensive for the average Guyanese person to afford. We removed that ban, therefore making car ownership once again affordable, because every family, understandably and rightfully, is aspiring to own their own mode of transportation. They may not start with a car, they may start with a motorcycle and work their way up, or they may start with a bicycle and then a motorcycle and then a motor car. But every family should aspire to own those things. And so I make these points really to say that when you speak about well-being and disposable income, you cannot fixate on a single variable, the percentage salary increase that is being granted. That is an extremely limited and narrow perspective in relation to disposable income and well-being. And so I wanted to make that point really to say to you that we take a holistic and comprehensive view of well-being. We consider what are the things that everybody wants. They want to earn a better income, of course, and that's understandable. And our aspiration is to make sure that people are able to earn a better income over time. That is our intention, and we will honor that intention. But people also want other things, other aspects of well-being. Like I said, being able to own your own home, being able to own your own motor car, being able to live in a community that has decent roads, being able to access good quality health care, having your elderly parents be able to access a decent pension. All of those things we've been addressing simultaneously, none of which were being addressed by the APNU AFC when they were in government. And then, of course, we have to consider the broader macroeconomic context, because we have to be mindful as you grant salary increases that you don't grant them in a way that will ultimately be harmful to those who are intended to benefit from these increases. And in particular here, I'm speaking about inflation. The world has been fighting grappling with inflation. And so, you know, the reference was made to last year and the year before. In 2021, we had the devastating floods in June that really had a tremendous impact on food prices. We had, and that fed through into 2022. We had, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That impacted immediately on wheat prices. You had the tailwinds of COVID-19 that was affecting the supply chain. That had an impact on the cost of every good, every single item being imported, being transported across the seas. And so you had, as is well known, you had around the world an inflationary spike in 2021 and 2022. That is widely known. That's globally documented. If you check around the world, you'll see that almost every country around the world had an inflationary spike in 2021, spilling over into 2022. That has now moderated. That has now moderated. And so you still have the increases that you have from the previous years. And on top of that, you have a further 6.5%. And so I want to say very clearly that this government understands that every Guyanese family wants to have more disposable income. We understand that. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, we welcome that. You are right to want to have more disposable income. We welcome that, and we encourage it, and we understand it. And we are committed to ensuring that you do have more disposable income. And we are achieving that not through one instrument, not through only the annual salary increase that is granted to public servants. We are achieving improved disposable income using multiple instruments, using steady increases in your salary, increases to the income tax threshold. You would recall that we increased the income tax threshold twice since we came into government. The restoration and increase of successive increases in the cash grant that is being given for children. If you're a family and you have children going to school, we are providing help to you that has never been provided before. That also impacts disposable income. We are making home ownership more affordable for you, so you can buy your own home instead of renting a home. So I wanted really to make that point, that these questions have to be viewed holistically, and you have to look at all of the aspects and the dimensions that impact on disposable income.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that detailed explanation. And you just mentioned the increase in the income tax threshold. In 2023, as you rightfully said, it went upwards yet again. Can you explain how does this feed into the management of the economy?
Well, there are two sides to that. One is the fact that increasing the income tax threshold, as we have done, like I said, twice since we came into government, has the impact of increasing disposable incomes. Every person who was previously paying tax, every person who is above the income the original income tax threshold will now pay less taxes, and thousands of persons have been removed from the income tax bracket because the threshold is now above their income. And so what you have is thousands of persons being removed from the income tax bracket, and you have billions of dollars being injected into the disposable incomes, the pockets of taxpayers. That in turn generates consumption in the economy, because the additional disposable income is used either to invest in household assets. People might invest in buy something for their home, or upgrade their home, paint over their fence, repair their back step, whatever it might be. Or they will consume more. They will buy more things for their children. They'll buy more things. They'll maybe, spend on some things that they maybe previously could not have afforded. And that is normal. That's what families do when they have additional disposable income. They either invest in some assets or they consume more. Needless to say, it does, of course, like I said, it generates and it multiplies itself in the economy, because more goods and services are bought in the economy. It does, of course, have a fiscal impact, because it means that the government will be collecting less revenue. And so we have to make a very careful calibration as to the revenue that is foregone, and we accept that, and we agree, and it is our intention progressively over time to forego revenue in order to increase disposable income. Well, I should say it's our undertaking not only to forego revenue, but to incur increasing expenditure over time, progressively to increase disposable income using all of the policy levers that are in our hands. But in addition to, to take that argument logically to its next step, if you imagine these two measures alone that I announced yesterday on behalf of the cabinet, the 6.5 salary increase and the payment of the 1 month bonus to the discipline services. And in fact, I would like to emphasize that for the first time, we are also paying civilian employees of the Uganda Defense Force. Previously, I believe that was not the case. Between those two measures alone, I'm not counting all of the other things that we've implemented. Between those two measures alone, you will have 54,000 persons benefiting, because it's 54,000 persons roughly who comprise the public sector employees will be benefiting. So you have 54,000 persons benefiting immediately. And they will have a total of $9 billion of additional disposable income, because we've estimated that the salary increase will cost $7.5 billion and the one-off bonus will cost $1.5 billion. So between those two, that is $9 billion of additional disposable income that will be paid out in December, before Christmas. That means that those 54,000 beneficiaries will be spending that $9 billion during the course of Christmas. They may save a little bit. They may buy some things for their homes. They're going to be spending that's an injection of $9 billion into the economy that will turn itself over many times over. And that then feeds through into beyond the public sector. It generates business for the private sector. It generates incomes for private sector employees too. It generates incomes for people who are selling in the markets, people who are selling in the stores, people who are operating the tailors and the seamstresses and the hairdressers and the barbers. That money is spent in all of those people's shops. That's an additional $9 billion. I will say this, that the APNU, I have often struggled to understand their logic. They tampered with a lot of things. Like, for example, I mentioned this bonus that they paid in December. And, many people recall how dismal Christmases were during those 5 years because of the absence of this injection of additional disposable income. If you're no longer paying people their salary increase in December, a decent salary increase in December, you're no longer paying them the bonus. You're no longer giving them any salary in lieu of leave at the end of the year. Those who were, like I said, were not able to take their leave. You're no longer paying any of these other benefits and transfers that we pay at the end of the year. The impact was felt. You just have to go back to those years, cast your mind back to those years. Christmas, for most years under the APNU AFC, for pretty much all of the years under the APNU AFC, Christmas the economy was in doldrums. It was in doldrums. there's no business, there's no activity taking place. And from the very year that we returned to government, you have seen a resumption of buoyancy in the economy. You have seen a resumption of activity at Christmas, specifically because of measures like this. You're going to see, imagine $9 billion being put in the market between now and Christmas. That $9 billion will work its way to the markets, to Stabroek Market, to Border Market, to Kitty Market, to Pleasance Market, to La Penitence Market. That is going to work its way directly into those markets.
So, Minister, in addition to the litany of measures that you would have explained and listed, the President would have recently announced also the graduate teachers will have a salary increase. It will benefit 4,000 of them with an average of $1 billion annually, and also an increase in allowances for teachers, which will rack up to $500 million annually. What impact do you envision this will have?
Well, here again, that's like I mentioned, the salary adjustments that we've made. You know, we made adjustments to a number of categories of employees within the discipline services, GDF, police, fire. We did those a few months ago. We did the health, a number of categories of health workers, nurses, doctors, specialists, etc. You mentioned the teachers now. Here again, that means immediately that the entire population, our entire teaching population, will have their disposable incomes increase. Well, I should say not the entire teaching population, but all of those who would be eligible under the criteria that would have been articulated, in particular our graduate teachers. And let me say this, that, so one, those measures immediately improve the incomes of our graduate teachers, but they also immediately provide an incentive for those who are not yet graduate teachers to go out and get their degrees or complete their degrees, because they can now see that they're going to get they're going to get a better salary if they have higher level qualifications. So we adjusted the salaries of graduate teachers, but we also gave higher allowances for postgraduate qualifications, graduate diploma, master's degree, and PhD degrees. There are a few persons in the teaching profession, relatively small number, who hold PhD degrees. There are several who have master's degrees, etc., providing an incentive for people to go out and get higher qualifications. And if you get high qualifications, you're eligible for higher salaries. That's also a very important measure. And that measure is not intended only to pay higher salaries. Of course, it will end up meaning that teachers will get higher incomes. But it will also mean that you will have more qualified teachers, which will in turn mean a better quality education for people's children. And every parent wants precisely that. Every parent wants their child to get a good quality education. We will see now more qualified teachers. You're aware we have a program under which we've expressed as a policy that we want to achieve 100% trained teachers in the education system. Consider for a moment what this will mean. If you have trained teachers populating the entire teaching spectrum, what that means is better quality education in every school, irrespective of where you are. I've been to remote communities and I've seen teachers doing the training using online. The CPC now delivers using online, or I think online or hybrid modes of delivery, so teachers don't have to leave their place of work and their place of residence and relocate to go and become a trained teacher. They're able to do a lot of their training remotely using online technology. That has made it possible now to achieve universal attainment of trained teacher status across our entire public sector education system. Here again, better trained teachers, better quality education, which is itself valuable to parents whose children are in the education system, and will ultimately redound to improve well-being. Better quality education means better chances at doing well as an adult.
Minister, when you cluster all of these measures, these policies, these increases, grants, etc., How does it align with government's objective and the image of government?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, because this People's Progressive Party government, led by President Ali, is a government that has, first of all, demonstrated its concern for the Guyanese people, and I think that you would have to do a whole other interview for me to articulate the number of examples through which we've demonstrated our genuine concern for the Guyanese people. Secondly, we have never been a government that will pursue what might appear to be popular on the surface, but in fact might ultimately not be the best thing to do for the longer term. So we could easily say, oh, we would have given or could have given or will give a higher salary increase. But we have to make, and obviously people will celebrate that and we will be popular. That would be the short-term popular thing to do. That would be easy to do. But we have to carefully consider, and as a government, we will, this People's Progressive Party government, will always carefully consider the impact of all of our policies. We don't want to award a salary increase at a level where immediately it triggers an inflationary response and you end up being worse off than you were before. We don't want to give a salary increase and then go back behind your back and take it back in other ways, as the APNU AFC did. We don't want to give you a salary increase but not give you improved services in your schools, in your hospitals, with respect to your infrastructure. That's not the kind of government that we are. You may ask that, well, why are we investing in all of these big things and the not so big things like infrastructure? Because they matter for the long term. They matter for the long term. And anybody who is a responsible householder knows that you have to strike a balance between doing the things that matter for the long term and doing the things that matter now. Every householder, every family, let's take a typical Guyanese family, the head of that family, whoever it may be, the father or the mother or the grandmother, whoever the head of that family may be, every day is making a choice between, should I use all of my income only to feed my children, or should I maybe not buy everything to feed them? Obviously, I want to feed them well to make sure that they're well nourished, but I also have to make sure that I set aside some to invest in their education. Because there's no point having a well-fed child today who is not pursuing an education. They may not enjoy the education now. They may say, well, why do I have to go to school now? But a responsible parent knows that they have to make sure that their child gets a good quality education, because that is important for their child's long-term future. A responsible householder will also make sure that, I'm going to make sure that this house is upgraded, made a little bit more comfortable. That's not necessarily buying the best and fanciest things to eat today or to consume today. But you're investing again in an asset that will matter for the long term. You might invest in a business that will generate income for the long term. You might buy some equipment, you might buy a stove and a fridge and say you're going to open a business to do some catering. You could easily say, don't buy the stove and the fridge and the freezer. Let me instead consume that money. But you buy that stove and that fridge or that freezer because you want to set up something that will generate income for the long term. Every householder makes those decisions. And managing everybody, all of your viewers, every day they're making those decisions. Should I consume all of my income today, or should I set aside a little bit because I want to try maybe to buy a minibus? I could easily say, well, I want to consume everything today and forget about the minibus. But the minibus is what is going to earn me an income going forward and make sure that I have a sustainable income. Because there's no point I consume everything that I have today and I don't have an asset that can generate an income for me into the long term. That is what the stove and the fridge will do. That is what the minibus will do. Earn me an income into the long term. The minibus or the taxi that I want to buy, it's going to earn me an income in the long term. Every single one of your viewers makes those choices every day in managing their own household budget. They're making sure that they set aside something in an asset that will generate some income for them and their families. They're making sure that they invest in their child's education. That's a long-term investment. And of course, they're making sure that their child is well fed and well nourished. Every household is balancing between those needs every day. And in government, it's no different. We have to make sure that we lay the foundation for the long term. Building the infrastructure, just like the assets that are being bought or would be bought by a household. Building the infrastructure that will generate returns. It is the roads, it is the electricity plants that will create the jobs that Guyanese people will be taking up. Because those roads and those electricity generating plants will improve the competitiveness of the Guyanese economy, will open up new industries, they will create new jobs. Those jobs will require new types of skills. Our young people are being educated with new types of skills. That's an investment in the future. It's an investment in the future. When we build up hospitals and we build up schools, you don't see the benefit of those today. But those are an investment in something that is critical for well-being for the long term. Making sure people are well educated, making sure that their medical care is taken care of, their health is taken care of through the public sector medical care, health system. And so all of these aspects comprise elements of our government's comprehensive policy to improve well-being. We are not a short-term government. We are not a government that will deceive the people and tell them one thing and go and do something else. We are a government who will say frankly to the people, having considered and weighed all of the facts, this is what we believe is the best course of action to take, or the best direction in which to go. We understand, and I'm glad that you posed the question in the manner that you did. Every family aspires to improve their well-being, and rightly so. They want certain basic things. They want a decent income. They want a good home. They want their own independent means of transportation. They want to educate their children. They want good quality health care if they fall ill. They want opportunities for upliftment and improvement. Standard. Everybody wants that. And this government is committed to ensuring that every single Guyanese family gets not one aspect, not just get an income because we want to say we give you 8%. We want to make sure that you get all of the above, because all of those aspects matter.
Thank you very much, Minister Singh. Well, there you've had it from the Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, who had the unenviable task of announcing the salary increases for public servants just only on Friday. I've been your host, Godfrey Brooms. Thank you for joining us and continue to enjoy.